Another OpenShift Commons briefing, this time with Snyk. We're going to hear from Hayley Denbraver and a few other folks from Snyk, and they're going to talk about securing your OpenShift apps. So I'm going to let Hayley take it away and introduce her other colleagues who are on the call. The Q&A will be in the chat, and at the end of the presentation and the demo, we will have live Q&A, and I'll unmute everybody. So save your questions for the end. Hayley, take it away.
Thanks so much, Diane. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everyone tuning in to hear more about how you can secure your OpenShift apps with, I say Snyk, there's a bit of a debate between offices on how it's pronounced, but Snyk, anything works. Let's get started. So a little bit about me. I'm part of the developer advocate team at Snyk. And you can find me on Twitter at Hayley Denb. Now, because Snyk, we eat, breathe, sleep security, so we've chosen this Doberman as our logo. But the developer advocate team is really interested in helping people do security and use our product well, and we love hearing from people. So when I think of my job, I think more of this golden retriever and how this golden retriever is friendly, helpful, and excited to talk to you about open source security. So we have a couple of people on the call today to help with questions, and that includes Mickey, who is a developer, and he works with business development. And we have Udi as well, who's our VP of Strategic Partnerships. And you'll probably hear from them a bit in the Q&A. So I'm going to break down a little bit what we're going to do today. And I'm going to open with some open source security talk and a little bit of background on Snyk. And then we're going to go into a sneak peek into our new Kubernetes OpenShift integration. And so you all get to see firsthand and some of the first people to see this new integration, and it'll be really exciting. And we're going to do a demo, which is great, and you can see just how easy it is to incorporate Snyk into your workflow and to help protect you from these open source vulnerabilities. Then we're going to do a quick review, and we'll move on to questions. So let's get started. So to open up talking about Snyk, Snyk and security just go hand in hand. And Snyk, our goal is to help you find and fix vulnerabilities in your open source dependencies. We want to make it as easy for you as possible because we really believe in incorporating this security posture into your entire development life cycle. So when you think about your app, I want you to think about this orange circle here. And this orange circle is going to represent the entirety of your app in production. All right. And the thing that we really like to drive home to people to make sure they're aware of is that even though this big circle represents your code in production, there's really a tiny bit of this circle that actually represents the code that you wrote. Everything else are the open source dependencies that you're using. And so if you think in terms of someone with malicious intent, someone who wants to break in, do some bad things, it makes sense for them to go for this big part of the circle that is your open source dependencies, right? Because they can read and inspect the code. There's also a bigger payoff because a number of people use these dependencies. So, you know, if they find a vulnerability, if they're able to exploit a vulnerability in an open source dependency, well, they could potentially get a much bigger payoff, right? And so at Snyk, our focus is really everything in your app that's not the code you actually wrote. And I'm going to show you how we help you find and fix the vulnerabilities that show up in this, this large orange circle, all right? So each of these dependencies is a security risk. And there's a lot of variation between the dependencies, right? We need to know what dependencies we have. But even if we know that, we may not know if it's developed by someone who has security expertise, may not know if it underwent security testing, and it may have known vulnerabilities, right? And you're going to want to know about that because you want to stay ahead of everybody, right? You want to be the person that it's harder to hack. So open source is written by people. And I guess you could say it's actually written by strangers. And some strangers are friends that you haven't met yet, but some strangers are bad actors. So in addition to there being accidental vulnerabilities, you can also run across malicious packages themselves. And, you know, we're trying to help you navigate all of this, right? Because Snyk loves open source. It helps us do really great things, and we want to keep using it, but we want to use it in the most secure way possible. Amazing things done with open source. I personally would rather be proactive than reactive, right? I want to know what is in the dependencies I'm using instead of finding out because someone broke in, right? When this is what your app looks like, where your dependencies account for the vast majority of your code, you're really going to want some insight into your dependencies, right? And the thing is, this has caused problems in the past, right? The Equifax breach of 2017, I'm sure most of you have heard about this. This was caused by a vulnerability in the struts package. And it was a real big mess. Lots of data was compromised, and it was very important data as well, right? And more recently, we had the event stream vulnerability, and this was related to Bitcoins and things like that. But this one is an example of a malicious actor. The original owner turned over their ownership of the library to someone who did not have people's best interests in mind. So these real life examples just really reinforces why we do what we do at Snyk. We want to help you avoid this. And we want to meet you where you are. We have built tools throughout the CI/CD pipeline to make things as easy as possible for you and to do our very best to prevent problems from going into production. And that's where Snyk plus OpenShift comes into play. And you get a sneak peek today of our new integration with Kubernetes, OpenShift, that kind of thing. So I am going to show you just kind of graphically what that looks like. So let's say you have an image and you want to deploy it, right? So the image here is represented by this boat, right? We're going to find a Docker image in our demo, okay? And what Snyk is capable of doing is we have an admission controller that you can set up and customize. So you can either let that image be deployed, or you can reject it if certain types of vulnerabilities are found. So the image has to pass through this gate and get evaluated before it's allowed to deploy. All right. And we're going to see this happen in, we're going to see the whole process, and it's actually pretty easy and pretty fast. It's also really customizable. So on the issue of being customizable, we currently rate open source vulnerabilities into 3 categories, basically high severity, a medium severity, or a low severity vulnerability. And what's great about the tool we have with Kubernetes and OpenShift is that you can customize what you're okay with going into production. So this is a very typical breakdown of maybe what you would want to see, where you would fail a deployment, prevent a deployment, if there were high severity vulnerabilities found, right? But then maybe you're okay with medium or low severity vulnerabilities going through and being deployed, but you may want to keep track of them or know about them. So this is one way we could set it up. But if you had a very sensitive application, you might say that that wasn't quite good enough, and you might set the threshold at medium severity. Or you might like to live dangerously and decide that you're all right with high severity vulnerabilities, but that you do want to be informed of what they are and be able to track them, right? So I'm going to go to the demo, and I'm going to pull up a video. So if you all can't see it, I hope Diane will let me know so I can adjust things.
It's working great.
Working great. That's great. All right. So in this demo, we're going to be jumping back and forth a bit between the terminal and the UI in order to give you the best picture of what is going on. Our aim is to show you how we can protect a project using the Snyk admission controller. So we're going to start with installing our Snyk admission controller for OpenShift and Kubernetes in general. We'll create a project with the name Snyk and install our controller in it. Then we're going to continue and use the provided Helm chart. So that is this command here. So do you remember the slide I showed you earlier with the red, orange, and yellow box representing high, medium, and low severity vulnerabilities? So we're going to recall that we talked about how you can set different thresholds according to the needs of your project. Well, that's what's going on with this command. First, we specify the project we are going to protect, and you can see that the project is my project. Then we're going to set the severity threshold to high, meaning we are not concerning ourselves with the medium and low severity vulnerabilities. So you can see the severity threshold parameter there. Finally, we're going to set the test override equal to false and the monitor equal to true. Now, setting the test override equals to false means that if we find a high severity vulnerability, we're not going to just wave it through anyway, right? We want it to cause the deployment to fail. And this monitor parameter is going to, it's going to connect the project with your Snyk account, and you will get continuous monitoring on successful deployments. And we will take a look at that a little bit later. So we're going to run this command. And there we go. So we hit return, and we can see that now the Snyk admission controller is installed and enabled for our project, and with the configuration that we set. So that's great. Now, before we get to the UI, we're going to have to set proper permissions in order for our admissions controller to operate properly. And that is what was being done here with the admin policy. All right, now we're going to move on to the UI, and we're going to select my project and go into this. Okay, so now we're going to see this controller in action. We're going to deploy an app based off a vulnerable image. So I'm going to click deploy image here. And for the sake of this demo, we're going to provide an image name. And in this case, we're going to build on top of the CentOS 7 image. So you'll see that happen here. And it found the CentOS 7 image, and we're going to provide a new name for the app that we're adding to the project, and we're going to use the name app-1. Then we're going to deploy it. We're going to see if it works. It's going to take a second, and there we go. It failed. But that's kind of what we wanted to see, right? Let's look at the error message and see what happened. It's telling us that it wasn't able to create app 1 because the Snyk admission controller denied the request. The admission controller called the Snyk API to check if the image is secure. It found the high severity vulnerabilities, and it denied the request to deploy this image. This is what we're hoping to see. Our threshold was set to high, we didn't override failures, and this is exactly the behavior we would expect. This is awesome because it means that you did not let an app with known high severity vulnerabilities out into the wild. So here we're seeing our admission controller acting as a gateway, but we can also set it up to act in a more passive way without blocking the deployment, but instead of just monitoring the vulnerabilities. And so I'm going to show you what that looks like now. So here it's showing our failures and found vulnerabilities in the Python library. And now we're going to move on to the more passive version. So in order to do that, we're going to need to do a Helm upgrade, change some parameters, and we'll see that happen here. So Helm upgrade, and this time, the thing that we're changing is that the test override is going to be equal to true. And that's because we want this to deploy, but because we have the monitor parameter set to true, we're going to be able to see the vulnerabilities that are in this image, and we'll be able to inspect them and learn more about them in the Snyk UI. So let's go back to the UI, and first we're going to run this. All right, and we'll go back to the UI and try to deploy that same image. All right, so we're going to search again for the CentOS 7 image. And again, we find it. This time, we're going to give it the name app2, and now we're going to try to deploy it. Let's see if it'll work. All right, and this time, app2 was created. This is because the override is in place, and so the creation of the app was successful. So that's awesome. But do you remember how we said that we wanted to monitor this application? So now we're going to go into the Snyk UI and look in this projects tab. And now we see our project app2 listed. And what's great here is with a really quick glance, you can see that we have 3 high severity vulnerabilities and 1 medium severity. And we will click through and see some more detailed information on these vulnerabilities. All right, so here we have a summary up top of the project telling us that we have 4 vulnerabilities and 146 dependencies. This is all interesting and relevant information. But then we can also scroll through and read about the different vulnerabilities, what kind they are, perhaps any remediation advice. And when it's broken down this way, you can take a closer look at it and decide, or so with the previous example, we rejected any high severity vulnerabilities. With this one, we let them through, but maybe upon looking through these, you decide you're not comfortable with one of them, something like that. This just gives you the information to make a really great informed decision on what dependencies you want to use and what kind of risk you're comfortable with. All right. We can also take a look at our dependencies, and we can show you the dependencies with the issues. We can also look at all of the dependencies, though I didn't film that. And if you play around with our product, you can see the dependency tree and all these interesting insights and information into the open source libraries you're using. So this is the end of the demo, and thanks for sticking with me through it. I'm going to take us back to the presentation and give some final thoughts and open things up for questions. So pardon me while I pull that back up. Let's see. All right, I'm going to assume that that is visible unless Diane tells me otherwise. And we're going to review and wrap up. So you can see here how Snyk helped us find these open source vulnerabilities. We also have capability of fixing them, but even finding them is great information, right? Because we were able to decide whether we wanted that image to deploy or not. And it's all automated with that admission controller and just really great. But we have tools as well to help you fix vulnerabilities in your open source dependencies. We have tools throughout the CI/CD pipeline. So here we saw a tool towards the end of that pipeline, right? Blocking deployment if there are still, known issues, right? But we can help you with development. We can help you with code review, all these sorts of things. I'm just really happy that we integrate with OpenShift. We try to meet people where they are, and we're just really happy to have been able to meet with this awesome community today and hopefully give you some insight into how you can use Snyk to up your security game. So thank you so much. We really like to hear from our community because we want to build awesome things that developers and other people in the industry will find it's really easy to use. So we love hearing from you. Our Twitter is particularly active. You can tweet us there at SnykSec, or you can reach out to me directly at Hayley Denbraver on Twitter. And you can try all of this from our website, www.snyk.io. Just a reminder that the thing you saw today is a sneak peek, but all of our users will be able to try it soon. So keep your ears open for that, I guess. And yeah, I think we're ready for questions, Diane.
All right. Well, there's a couple of Dianes. Diane Fedema, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question. You're already unmuted, so go for it.
Okay, great. So I just had a question regarding the vulnerabilities that you're detecting. Initially, I was thinking that you were going to look for things like people that leave compilers along, with their images by accident or whatever, or that they leave editors in. But it looks like this is a different kind of vulnerability that you're exposing here. These are like known issues that are security issues that are known in the community. Is that the case?
Yes, you understand correctly. We draw data from, there's a few different vulnerability databases, NVD, CVE. So we have that data, and we also have a security research team that does things like they comb GitHub to find new vulnerabilities and issues. So yes, what we are doing is we help people keep up to date, and we keep people up to date on known vulnerabilities.
Okay.
And does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. That's exactly what I was asking.
Perfect.
Really nice presentation. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, when you have, we saw the project in the demo, it had nearly 150 dependencies. And that's kind of a lot to juggle. And so a tool like this can help you automate it. And that means that you're all the more likely to stay on top of those known vulnerabilities.
Definitely.
Yeah, great.
The images I build have so many dependencies, and it completely
totally.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just add a bit of color. This is Udi from Snyk.
Thanks, Udi.
So on a given day, and depending on language, on average, about 40% of our database is stuff that we find and we surface, and obviously we disclose it. But there's always like a time window until things get classified. So we're a CNA. So, we have relationships with academia, with researchers. Like Hayley said, we have kind of these machine learning algorithms scouring the web, looking for things that may be vulnerabilities, and then we analyze them in-house. And then you get that on top of the aggregation of everything that is public data, which is roughly 60% of our database.
Yeah.
And I also see a question from Peter. Do we scan custom content? So we look at the manifest files, and we look at what libraries and packages you're leveraging. So we don't look at your source code. We don't look at things that are custom. I do believe you can you can add your own scanning to your own packages by the CLI, but I'm not 100% on that.
I have a question about that, just a follow up. So if you scan your own code, can you scan for things like, what sort of things would you typically look for? Like leaving things, like I was suggesting before, like compilers and things and editors that you shouldn't be leaving in your finished production image, or what kinds of things does it look for?
Yeah, so we don't look at the code itself. So what I was in my answer before, let me just clarify. If, for example, you forked a project or a library that is known, and you want to add it, then if it's in your manifest file, we would be able to look at that. But we don't go into the source code. We're not a like a SAST, DAST type of company. We're complementary to that.
Yeah. So Diane, there are a few resources I would point you to. Something we've been doing recently is releasing what we call cheat sheets for different tools and languages, that kind of thing. So for instance, I believe we recently released a Docker cheat sheet that gives 10 best practices for Docker security. And so I would encourage you to check those out because they give a really good idea of where you can start.
Okay.
And those are focused more on your own code or your own practices versus working with these open source dependencies.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'll retweet that from my Twitter later today. So
if you give me
you guys can check it out.
I'll add it into the video links too. So when we post it,
sure.
As well. Can you talk a little bit about how to install Snyk?
Udi,
I got to say it right.
Yeah, sure. Snyk,
okay.
Snyk or Snyk, not Snyk. Yeah. So Snyk is, in a general sense, we're either a hosted tool or an on-prem tool. What we showed here is we used a Helm chart for installing essentially an admission controller and a webhook that talks to your Snyk account, which is, in this case, in the demo, was hosted, could be on-prem. So that's what you saw in the demo. And inside that container, there's a script that pulls the image in question and runs Snyk tests. So there's a Snyk token inside that you inserted, and it asks Diane's Snyk org, hey, do you know this container? And what's your opinion of it? And what are the rules? In this case, the rules were high severity. Does that answer? Yeah?
Yeah, I think it does. The reason I'm asking is because a lot of what we're seeing is these integrations with OpenShift are moving to an operator-based deployment. And if you have a Helm chart approach already, it's really pretty simple to create an operator from a Helm chart and get it into the operator hub. So I'd love to see, maybe we can work on that together and chat about that at another upcoming event called Summit next week.
Yeah, sounds good.
We can figure out how to do that. The other thing that's kind of interesting, we talk about like looking at the code, but where else can we sort of fit this into the development cycle?
All right. Well, so we have a number of slightly different tools that you can incorporate at different points in the life cycle. And I personally really like our CLI tool. It's something that you can use, the minute you start writing code, developing a project. You can you basically install it and authorize your account, and you can run it whenever you like. And what that means is you're able to make decisions about the dependencies you're using, early on in the development versus waiting until you get, further down the line. And then that way, like, hopefully that saves time, right? Because it's easier to make a change at the beginning than at the end. But at the end, you want to be sure what you're deploying is going to be as safe as possible, right? So I personally like the CLI tool. We also have tools that they can run our tests before a pull request is allowed to be merged. We just have tools at a bunch of these different points. Maybe Udi wants to chime in a little, or I don't know if Mickey's here.
Yeah, I mean, specifically for, you hear me? Yeah, I can. So specifically for for this use case, I think you get the most value out of Snyk using it within your source control system, like Git-based, for example, where you can fix by pull requests and continually monitor as new commits come in. So that's the most powerful piece where developers are actually actually committing. And you can also go further to the left with an IDE. So something we're happy to chat about at the summit next week is about if anybody's using Code Ready and is interested in Snyk and that. We're happy to understand what that means. And then as Hayley kind of alluded, further on to the right, you want to have these gates. So we showed the admission controller before you deploy. You can have a gate before you push to a registry to make sure that the stuff that goes up is secure enough. CI/CD before you build. You can trigger new builds as well. So there's a lot of different options you can use around the main functionality, which is around Git.
Yeah, and we have tools that are specific to Docker or containers, images, that kind of thing. And those we released them relatively recently, and they've been. Do we have any more questions?
I think that was all the questions that were in the chat for today.
Yeah.
Definitely, if you go to your next slide, love to see everybody at Red Hat Summit have a visit there. I'd love to talk to you guys more about integrating with Code Ready and see where we can go with that. This is a great introduction. So I'm sure there's a lot more. So we're looking forward to, as you mentioned, lots of other tools that you have. Another briefing sometime in the not too distant future, hopefully from you guys.
We'd really like that. We have a whole DevRel team that loves doing these sorts of things and spreading the word. So thanks for inviting us today. We really appreciate it. And like you said, Diane, we would love to see people stop by our booth at Red Hat Summit. We'll be at booth 231, and I will be there, and Udi will be there as well, and a few of our other team members. So feel free to stop by, and we can give you a demo in person, or we can give you a shirt with a dog on it, or you can just chat about security. We'd love to see you.
That would be great. And hopefully you can also come and host a little bit of time in the OpenShift Commons meet and greet in Community Central at the summit floor too.
Yeah, that sounds great. We would love to.
All right, so look for them there. And we'll see everybody next week. There won't be a briefing next week for obvious reasons, but there will be an OpenShift Commons gathering on Monday, and all of that will be streamed live on facebook.com/OpenShift because the event itself is sold out. So there are no more seats in the room, and we have around 1,000 people attending. So it's going to be a lot of briefings and very fast. So if you didn't get a ticket, go to Facebook. The OpenShift landing page in Facebook, and it'll all be streamed there, and then it'll be uploaded on YouTube as well. All the videos from that, as well as this video today will be uploaded with any resources that Hayley and Udi send me. I will link them in the YouTube comments section. So thanks again for coming today. We really look forward to meeting you all in person. Udi, who I've met before, but Hayley specifically. Make sure you do introduce yourself, and
absolutely,
we'll all just be happily ensconced in craziness next week at Summit and picking up swag everywhere. So yeah, definitely looking forward to getting my Doberman T-shirt. So
awesome.
Take care, and thank you very much for coming today.
All right.